Welcome to Diversity Inclusion Affairs Committee's Community Engagement Talk. Today's topic is homelessness in Bay County. And November is National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Month. And the lack of low-income housing across Bay County is becoming a growing concern. Our speakers today are Ms. Sue Bowen and Mr. David Goldie, Ms. Rebecca Zapata. They're from Pass for Bay District Schools, and Ms. Carol Tyrone from the Salvation Army Domestic Violence Program. Thank you very much for coming. They will discuss the current state of those issues in Bay County and then share their efforts to remove barriers to advancement. Please welcome the speakers. Thank you. Would you like to get in?
Okay. Since Michael took out all of the housing that was affordable, and since then they've started putting housing back in, not affordable, for the population. So folks who were generally on housing have still nowhere to be because they have not rebuilt, and those who were accepting HUD, which is a different form of housing options, those vouchers are also not being accepted because the landlords who did accept them can make more money on what's currently out there. So that's kind of where the process, even 3 years in, other people think that we should be done and that we should be back up and rolling, but without housing we don't have that. So we deal specifically, David and I deal specifically with the high school students and those that are transitioning to college and or work or anything else. So just so that you get an idea, currently we have 1,200 to 1,500 students who are homeless, who are still marked homeless. And then in the high school population, we have 315 who are unaccompanied, which means that they are not with a parent. They're living with a friend, they're living with a coach, they're living with somebody else. So those numbers for us have not really decreased a lot in the last 3 years. Elementary, you're looking at 700 kids who are marked homeless. So you're looking at populations who are still living doubled up. They're still living with relatives who, just because they have not been able to be housed anywhere. And this, you're looking at least another 3 years before that situation changes. So that means for them financially, where are they working? Because, you know, jobs are also the other option. So we work a lot with all of the things that help them, especially the high school students. We really focus on the unaccompanied high school students. We work on any kind of food stamps that because they qualify for food stamps. They qualify for Medicaid, which they did not know. We've got a large number of that population who have had parents who are either deceased. So then we work on death benefits. We work on transitioning for employment related stuff and how we can get vocational rehab involved if they qualify for those different agencies. We have expanded what we used to do with the homeless population to now really trying to encompass everything in the community that we can find that will help them move along. And we've met with DCF, because with the DCF, a lot of people want to make a call because the kid is homeless, and DCF is like, they're old enough to voluntarily leave, and that's what they do. But we have a line with them where it's also, you can use it for the parents, where it's like assistance, parent assistance, or we use it for student assistance, like what's out there that we don't know about that you guys can hook us up with. So just so you can get an idea, for a homeless male, there are 2 beds available in Bay County. 2 beds available for long-term homeless. Not HIDL, 2 male beds. For females, there are 4. Long-term, there's 4. And for maternity, there's 4. So if we have a pregnant teen, so you're looking at a total of 10 for all of Bay County kids. So that means 10 out of the 315 may have somewhere to sleep. And it's hard because the kids want to finish high school here, they want to finish their senior year here. So then it's like, where can we hook them up? Sometimes it's buying them a tent. Sometimes it's taking them grocery shopping so that wherever they're staying, they're not a burden on where they are.
So some of the other benefits that we try to coordinate for them is many times they lack the legal documents that they need, such as a birth certificate, which you have to get an ID, which you have to get a job. And sometimes they don't have their social security card, so you also need that to get a job. So we help them with those legal documents like that. We also have vans, and we transport them to doctor's appointments, dental appointments. We also help them if they need an eye exam. We help them get hooked up with the one doctor that we work with provides some free eye exams to our unaccompanied youth, which we greatly appreciate, but we coordinate all that. Another thing that we do also help with too, which is kind of, TRIO here from Gulf Coast has some of their representatives that are in the schools, and it's really a great program, but we will help to make a referral to the navigators. They call them the navigators, and the navigators will help them do their FAFSA, help them, complete their college application. Sometimes we take them to Haney if if they don't want to graduate from college or go to college, but they say, I want to go to Haney and see what I can do there. We'll take a tour over there to Haney, show them what's available over there. Another thing too is that sometimes because of necessity of working, they just absolutely can't be in a regular school setting, like going to school every day. They have to work. So there are some alternate programs, schooling programs that we also help to coordinate for them so that they can work and go to school, at the same time. There are some options available, but most of the kids that we work with, I call them kids, but most of the students that we work with, they have no idea, that all these services are available to them. So we, get the word out like here or in schools, and so we get the referrals, that someone might not be living with a parent, legal guardian, and we'll meet with them and see what their needs might be, and then we go from there.
And Rebecca works with us with our Hispanic population, and she helps us navigate that system as well, because that includes immigration and DACA and all of those government programs.
Would you like to ask issues?
Well, especially after the hurricane, with a lot of Hispanic population coming in here to fill the jobs, the construction and the building of all the houses, they didn't know what to do with the kids. They didn't even thought about schooling the kids, and we are finding these kids just at home being taken care of other people because they don't know, they don't ask, they're just here to work. So we managed to register them at school, we get them school clothes and school supplies, and get them hooked up with all the services they need through the school.
How about the language? Are they?
Well, we have an ESOL program, and we also have a great pathologist, is that what it is?
Mhm.
The speech pathologist, and she's bilingual. So she can assess what needs they have in any of both languages, and it's been working really good.
I have a question. You mentioned there are so many number of beds
Mhm.
for those youth. Where are those?
Anchorage runs it. It's called TLP. Anchorage runs it. It's called TLP. It's called Transitional Living Program. And they had more beds right after the hurricane, but as grants are, they didn't get funded fully for the grants that they did have.
So how many beds do they have available?
So they're trailers out on transmitter. So there's 2 pregnant trailers. One has 2 beds or 2 bedrooms in it, one has 3. And then there's a 3-bedroom trailer for the girls and a 3-bedroom trailer for the guys. Generally speaking, they don't fill them all up because they use it as an the other bedroom is an emergency. So for long terms, there's an emergency bedroom available, and that's real short term for them.
The transitional is up to what, 21, 22 years old?
Mm-hmm. They can stay till 23.
I've referred, counselor here, and I've referred students to them. So you're saying they do not have what they used to have several years ago. And so, what, 3 or 4 beds, is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. We have,
Long term?
yes, at this point, I have 6 males on the wait list, and there are 8, I think, females that we have on the wait list, maybe 7 now, that usually by the time the wait list comes up, they've found alternative places to come in, because they do try to keep them long term. They don't want it to be short term like Heidel. They do try to keep them stable for educational purposes, as well as all of the stuff that they throw into the mix. So if you have somebody who, like we have somebody who's started at 16 and is now 18, so that bed's not going to be open. So you've got all those other kids who've been approved, they've gone through the process of application, that are just waiting.
Because we have that here too. You know, we have, well, no, we have the problem. We have students. No, we do not have that. We do not have that.
Will you pass that?
Please, I did not know that. But we do have, you know, we have homeless students as well. And so it is very difficult, even more difficult, to find places for them to go because of their age, because they were over 18. So I was hoping you maybe had a solution for that.
No, no. Not that I'm not working on it. You know, there's a house behind where the recruiters are on 23rd Street.
Yes.
I've talked to Pat, well we've talked about it for about 5 years. He's wanting to purchase that property, what has those 2 houses and that huge big one. He says in February he should have the funding to purchase that. And so that the 2 smaller houses he wants to use is kind of, I won't call it drop-in, but like if you just want somewhere to spend the night tonight, versus the main house will be staffed and be longer too. And there are 8 bedrooms there. And if he puts 3 people in a bedroom, that would exponentially open it up. So, God willing.
I'll stop this question. Thank you very much. I want to make sure Ms. Carol has enough time to. So she's going to talk about the Salvation Army Domestic Violence Program.
So,
Let me show her presentation.
I have to stand up. I can't sit and talk. My brain will not get in gear that way. So I'm the new community educator. This is my 2nd week, so I'm really excited. We haven't had one since before Michael, or longer. I'm from California. I moved here, bought my house 2 weeks before Michael. Yeah, that was wonderful. Fortunately, we were still in California, so we missed Michael, but we're still dealing with it. But anyways, go ahead. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women, more than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. I think it's important that you understand domestic violence because it's the most underreported crime in the United States. It's also the most misunderstood because almost 50% of women on the streets are victims of domestic violence who left their house with their children. I can tell you in LA, when we study this, we have more than 50% of the women are out on the street because there's no place to go, because they have no money, because one of the way people keep control of women is through their finances. Next one. Every 9 seconds, a woman is abused or beaten and assaulted in the United States. So by the time we finish this conversation in an hour, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a social worker, but we could figure it out. That's a lot of women being abused across the United States. Okay. One way to put it into perspective for you, that from 2001 to 2012 Afghanistan, we lost about 6,500 military members were killed there. And then the number of women in the same period of time who were murdered by their current or an ex-partner was almost 12,000, excuse me. So that's nearly double the amount of people we lost in Afghanistan. Okay? Next. In Florida, excuse me, We have 105, almost 106,000 cases were reported in 2019 for the entire state. Those cases have gone up since Michael and have gone up exponentially with the COVID, because people are stuck in their homes and people can't get away. And so somebody who's being abused at home is more likely to be abused when the batterer is in the house all the time. We've had 563,000, almost 564,000 bed nights. That's how we count how many people we have in 2019. Unfortunately, because of Michael, we lost our shelter for 10 months. And even now with COVID, we only have 21 beds, but we can't fill them all because we can only put one family to a room under HUD laws. But we have received over 70,000 calls. And again, I can't tell you what it was in 2020 and 21 because we haven't got the data back yet, but it has gone up across the state. Okay. As a little history, some important things. In 1753 BC, there was a rule. So how many of you have heard the term a rule of thumb? Yeah. Do you know what it means?
Yes.
Who knows? Go ahead.
That you couldn't beat your wife with a stick that was bigger than your thumb.
That's where it comes from. So every time somebody uses that, please educate them to tell them where it came from. The rule of thumb.
Or not bigger.
No bigger than the diameter of your thumb. So if you're a weightlifter and a really big thumb, you could hit your wife with something bigger. If you're somebody small, you could hit them with something small. That was,
Sorry, I just had a moment. Wow.
yeah. So one would think after 753 BC, that would change. However, in 1867, North Carolina instituted the same law. So it didn't go away. It has now, obviously, but it was around for a long time. The first shelter opened in 1967 in Maine. So if you happen to be fortunate enough to live in Maine, you could go to a shelter. Right now, there's about 2,000 shelters across the United States, and everybody's going, wow, that's a lot per state. Our shelter is the only shelter for 7 counties, and we have 21 beds. And we have a waiting list. It's the fact of our life. We have a waiting list. And it's even harder because we can take people based on not only the number of beds, but the number of children. So if you come in with 7 children, you could take 2 rooms. If you come in by yourself, again, under HUD, you might end up with a room under COVID, you may be in a room by yourself. And we're very strict on the COVID rules because we have had cases and having children in the house, small children and babies, who can't be vaccinated, we have to be very careful. Okay. Whoops, other way. So there are some myths, and I think it's real important that we talk about them so you understand again how it's hard it is for people to leave and why. Anger does not cause domestic violence. A lot of people think that if you're angry, you hit somebody. Well, most perpetrators of domestic violence are very nice out in the community and never hit anybody but their partner. And that they lose their temper. Well, they manage to control their temper everywhere else except when their partner's around. And it only happens in poor, uneducated, or minority communities. Some of my biggest cases in California were doctors, lawyers, and a judge, who were all batterers. The 2 biggest professions where we see domestic violence that people don't recognize is the military and the police. If you're living in an authoritative, controlled environment, you take that home. And people don't believe that men can be abused, and the reality is 25% of men are victims of domestic violence. Which is even harder because there are no shelters for men. We will take men in our shelter, but again, it comes down to beds and rooms and how much space. In California where I worked, we had 1 shelter that covered entire Southern California for men, and they had 30 beds. And they were allowed to take their children. Some in shelter for domestic violence won't allow them to take their children with them. But there's a cost to domestic violence. Approximately $5.8 billion a year is lost to domestic violence. Part of that is medical, another is lost productivity. And when you looked at lost productivity, it equates to 32,000 full-time jobs. So if you think about how many jobs are available here now in Bay County right now that were full-time, that's a lot of people you could be putting back to work, 32,000. But women often have to call in sick because of their injuries, because they don't want to take care of their kids, or their partner just won't let them leave that day. Okay? And it's important, okay? Webster's dictionary says that violence is an exertion of physical force to injure or abuse, like stabbing, shooting, etc. However, we look at it from 4 types: physical, sexual, verbal, and emotional psychological abuse. Okay? Okay, boom. Florida law, which we need to know changes on a regular basis with the Department of Justice and what the community thinks. So right now, Florida law, domestic violence is an assault, aggravated assault, sexual battery, kidnapping, false imprisonment, which we see a lot of, or any criminal offense resulting in an injury or a death to one member of a family household. Family member changes. It used to be we were intimate partner violence, and it still is. However, we have broadened the definition of who can file. So people living together can be considered a domestic violence household even if they're not married. People have a child in common even if they're not together. An adult child living with a parent. An adult child who's over 18 who's abusing their parent. That's domestic violence. An adult child who's over 60 and living with an adult parent who's over 70. That's domestic violence. In the state of California, it doesn't qualify for elder abuse under many circumstances, but it does under domestic violence. So this is a way to get people to get help. Okay. All right. The underlying issue is power and control. All right. Power and control is used to control situations and people. They use it to, and it says her, it could say him, but we're used to dealing with the majority of the victims being women. To threaten to hurt her, threatens to commit suicide if she leaves him. And if you think about it, if someone told you they were going to kill themselves if you walked out the door, how would you feel if they actually did because you walked out the door? That's a real great power and control dynamic. Threaten to report to immigration. People who are here that are not legally here, they're always threatening to report them even though they brought them here. People who are legally here often don't have their own documents, and so their partner has them and they still threaten to have them deported. And then they suggest they know people in power, which could be true, especially in small communities like this, like everybody knows the sheriff, or everybody knows the mayor, or everybody knows somebody in power. And if you keep telling people that, they tend to believe it. Okay, next. This is a power and control wheel. It came from Duluth. They started it, and it talks about all the ways, as you see, physical violence and sexual is on the outside. That's actually a very small part of domestic violence. What's big is the emotional and coercive control that comes with emotional and verbal abuse. So for example, I had a client in Wisconsin whose husband, she kept saying, there was an older couple, they'd been married about 60 years. And she kept saying to her husband, where's the salt and pepper shaker Billy bought me? Where's the napkin ring Sally bought me from the fair? And on, and he kept saying, you're crazy, that didn't really happen. He tried to convince her she had dementia, and it was working. He had a sudden heart attack and he died. When the family came to clean out the house in the attic, they found a box that said, do not touch, do not open. When they opened it, all of the missing items she'd asked for were in there because he was gaslighting her to convince her that she had dementia. So those are the kind of things that we see. Okay. So these are the ones that we look at. Emotional abuse is the number one. Economic abuse is second, because if you don't have money, you can't get away. And a lot of people have to turn their checks over to their husbands, or their husbands don't even let them work, for that matter. So they don't have control of their economic situation. And in this country, marital rape was legal until the 1990s. So a man could force his wife to have sex and rape her, and she couldn't call the police. Now that's been outlawed in most states. Some states still have little provisions of how they have to prove it, which, like rape anywhere else, is a he said, she said kind of a thing. So that's still a big issue for us. Go ahead. Oh, it spins. This is a well-known cycle of violence that tells us how victims feel and what they know. What they know is that there's a tension building phase. They're walking around on eggshells. They know something's going to happen. They don't know what it is, but they can feel it in all of being in their body. Then the incident happens, whether it's verbal, emotional, psychological, physical, it doesn't matter, it happens. And then there's a part where the partner says, oh, this will never happen again, I'm sorry, I promise, flowers, candy, the whole nine things. We used to call it the honeymoon phase. And then we go to a quiet, calm phase. Well, everything's okay because she's accepted his apology, he knows what he did was wrong, so he's backing off, and we go right back into the tension building phase. These phases can last from days to months to years. There is no time cycle on this. So I've seen them where they're very, very fast, and I've seen where people have been months and months before the abuse happens again. But that tension building just keeps going for all that time. Okay. So why do victims stay? And that's important for you all to understand. If any of you are ever going to be working with victims, why do they stay? Well, They stay because they're afraid. They stay because they're shameful. They stay because they have nobody else to turn to. Because one of the ways to keep somebody in their relationship is to isolate them. So if you know somebody who's a victim of domestic violence, don't walk away. Keep letting them know that you're there for them, because it's easier. Again, being a single mom, like I said, those are a lot of our homeless people on the street are single moms who've been through domestic violence, and they only left because they had no other recourse, and now they're homeless. They don't leave because of the court and the legal processes. Those are really complicated. She does believe that it's her fault. She's been taught by many religions that if she'd just be a better wife, this would all stop. She loves him, because let's face it, not all of them are all bad all the time, because if they are, they wouldn't stay. I mean, if he hit you the first night you were with him, or she hit you the first night you were with her, you wouldn't go out with him again. But since it's gradual, it doesn't stay that way. And he's always promising to change. The biggest reason they stay is the lack of resources. They have 10 beds, we have 21, and we cover the 7 counties. If you're in a bigger urban area, you may be lucky. Where I worked, we had 5 shelters. Second largest county in the United States, second largest population in the smallest county in the United States, and we had almost 100 beds, and we had waiting lists on a regular basis. Okay, but what we always say is, why doesn't she leave? What we should be saying, why is he breaking the law? Why is he beating her? Because what she's doing is not illegal. What he's doing is illegal. Okay. Again, it's not easy. A lot of times we've studied, it takes somebody 7 times to leave before they ever actually can leave, because it takes time to get everything in gear. And one of the things we do at the shelter and our outreach program and on our hotline is help them build safety plans so they can get out safely. This first 72 hours somebody's in the shelter, we usually keep them in the shelter incognito because we know that's the most dangerous time for death. So we help people build safety plans. What kind of papers do they need? They often don't have their birth certificates. They also don't have their rental agreements or their mortgage papers, or they have no idea what their taxes look like. So we help them figure out how to do that. So every time they leave, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Every time they leave, they learn something else, and we teach them how and where to keep these documents safe. So also leaving somebody who has that much control is really, really hard. So we do the strategic planning. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of lawyers in Bay County who will help, or any of the 7 counties for that matter, who will help pro bono. So getting an injunction, getting any kind of help for divorce, and if there's children in there and it's custody issues, you will never find a pro bono attorney. So finding somebody to help these people legally is really difficult. Okay? So we do that. We have people that help them. But we also need to look at the characteristics of people who batter. They have jealousy issues, they have controlling behavior, they're verbally abusive. Right now what's going on in the United States drives me up a wall when I hear people being so verbally bullying. Because when I wonder, what are they like at home? And more importantly, what are we teaching our children when we act that way? How are we teaching our children that they should respond to people? They often are guys, in most cases for guys, not so much for girls, get involved really quickly. You date you today and they want to marry you 3 weeks later. You see somebody that's going through that kind of relationship, really try to warn them that it's not a healthy relationship. Men who batter generally have very rigid gender roles. He's the head of the house, he's the breadwinner, you're the wife, you're the mother, and these are the things I expect from you. They blame everybody else for their problems. They put in financial restrictions, they use isolation, they use threats of violence. And they break things, and one of the #1 things that we see is hindering pets. A pet to some people is an inanimate object, so they don't care if they kill it. And they use it to control. We have had so many cases, and I've had 2 cases of my own, where the husband killed the pet. And she's never gonna leave, because if he can kill my dog, what's he gonna do to me? The other thing we want you to understand is how domestic violence affects kids, and you're already hearing part of it. They end up being homeless, not just from Michael. We know that kids who are exposed are 63% more likely to be in trouble with the law. And they grow up and they get involved in the juvenile justice system, and they start having antisocial personality issues and mental health issues, depression, anxiety, PTSD. Okay. They also have trouble negotiating intimate relationships, because what you see at home is what you learn. So if you're coming from a battering home and you learn that love hurts, you teach love hurts. And kids learn that it's okay to hurt the people that you love, okay? More than half the female victims of intimate partner violence have children under the age of 12. 50% of the women who are victims of domestic violence have children under the age of 12. A lot of times women will leave when their partner finally abuses their child. That's like the line in the sand. But honestly, they draw lines in the sand that keep moving anyways. But that's one of the big ones when they'll finally leave. 3 to 10 million children witness domestic violence annually. In some states, it's a crime, and you'll be arrested for child abuse. In other states, they will remove your children, which then, again, if she leaves, in order not to lose her children, since she's not protecting them, she's now homeless with children. Okay. So one of the things we see are behavioral acting out in kids, which again turns them into our homeless population because they have no place to stay and they have no one that's there to teach them. The behaviors change based on their ages. We see regression in toileting, we see regression in behavior, we see a lot of mental health issues in these kids, learning impairment, and a lot of PTSD. Okay. Then we need to talk about dating violence, although that is not causing our homeless problem. Our homeless problem doesn't help it. 1 out of 11 high school females and 1 out of 14 high school males have reported being involved in physical domestic violence, dating violence. And unfortunately, when I started this 20 years ago, it was really rare to hear women, girls, who were being abusive. And I've been watching this over the last 20 years, how girls are escalating in this behavior. So now it's almost 50-50, as you can see. Almost 50-50, the amount of girls who are abusing their partners. I can't answer the answer other than society has said it's okay to be not such a nice person. Okay, so just in summary, age, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, income, none of those play a bearing on whether or not you're a victim of domestic violence. It's about power and control. Batter is batter by choice. It comes in many forms, but most important, the victim is not to blame. And that's one of our biggest problems, is we constantly want to blame the victim. Okay. So what do? We have a 24-hour crisis hotline. There's somebody on our hotline 24/7. It is answered by a human being all the time. So you can call and just say, I need to talk. We'll ask you if it's safe, and we'll talk to you, and we'll let you call back. And if you need to leave a number so we can call you back, we'll call you back. We provide counseling. We provide victim advocacy, information, and referrals. And just like we've been talking about, the shelters are not like you can just drive over to a shelter and say, I'm here. We actually had someone do that today. First off, the shelter's at an undisclosed location because it's $5,000 if we tell. The state just passed the law, and I think it's 1 to 5 years in jail if you share the location of the shelter. In California, it's the same thing. It starts at $3, goes to $5,000, and can go up to 20 years in jail. I had a PI who actually found our shelter who lost his license and went to jail for 5 years. These people are already at risk, so we're not going to put them at any further risk. They need to be safe. We have children's services. We have one very dedicated child's advocate. We have one very dedicated legal advocate. I go out and do professional development and community education, and we do risk assessment. Today, after I leave here, I'm going out to do a risk assessment. So we do that to help. Is it safe to leave somebody in their home? Can we find a better way to handle it? Can we teach them something different? Obviously, the shelter is the only part that's 24/7. The rest are based on our hours, but there's always somebody at the shelter. So everybody always asks me, why purple? And so it comes from the women's suffrage movement way back in the 1900s when we tried to get the right vote. They wore white with sashes that were purple, or lavender at that time, gold and white. And so the lavender has stayed and is actually morphed into purple. And so it's about, it's been associated with females, and so we just added it, and we've been using it ever since 1978 with the first Women's March. Okay, that's why we're purple. This is our contact information. I don't know what the 7th county is, but those are the 6 of the counties we cover. I know there's a 7th, they told me so. Like I said, we have a 24-hour crisis line. And maybe not, maybe it's 6 and I just misunderstood. It sounds right though, 6. Okay, and then again, it is the most incidents are never reported. So if you know it, you know that see something, say something, that doesn't work quite as well. But if you hear neighbors fighting and you're hearing lots and lots of noise, call the police. So what if you're wrong? It might scare somebody. I have brochures up here on advice to friends who have family members or friends that are in domestic violence, our shelter, and then teen dating violence. So feel free, and I have some other freebies you can take. Any questions?
Why is it illegal to disclose the location of shelters? Is it to
protect the victims.
from retaliation?
It's to protect, right now, it's to protect the victim and the staff. So, for both reasons, but mostly for the victims, because people do stalk. We had a case of stalking where the guy took a cell phone and hot-wired it into her car, and so he had a GPS on it, and he was able to track her to the shelter, which puts everybody else at risk in the shelter, because you don't know what he's going to do. And we had somebody, this PI guy who lost his license, did tell this guy, and he did try to break in the shelter, and that shelter had 45 beds. So we probably had 10 families in there with babies. So it's to protect them.
You said to like call the police if you hear the neighbors.
I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing, so.
You said like it's best to just like call the police if your neighbors are accusing them like fighting and stuff and like it's really intense. But how can you know that the like police won't make matters worse?
Okay.
Like how can
That's
you,
a really good
How
question.
can you trust the police for the domestic violence?
So that's a really good question. And police are trained, and that's why I'm loud, because I was trained by the police how to do these trainings, and so I get loud to make people pay attention, especially cops who are busy doing other stuff, like we all do during our work day. It is a problem, and it could happen. And we even teach victims how to survive without escalating their own violence as they're learning how to get out of their situation. Especially, and I don't want to stereotype anything, but I've worked in enough communities, small rural communities, especially if they really do know the police, could make things better. So you have to make a judgment call, and one of the ways to do that is talk to your neighbor and ask them, not him, her, well, whomever is the victim, ask them, would you like me to call the police? So I have a friend who was kidnapped and sexually abused and drug out to the desert. So when she got back and was well enough to live in her apartment, she told her neighbor, if you see my porch light on during the day, call the police. If you see my porch light on during the day, call the police. If you don't see my porch light on during the day, I'm fine. And one night when she got home from work, she forgot to turn off her porch light, so it was on the next day, so they called the police. But they had that conversation. And we try to teach victims to talk to somebody, because it's such a hidden issue that they don't want to talk to anybody, because it is such a shameful issue. So if you can talk to your neighbor and say, hey, I was really concerned, what would you like me to do? Give her some power, because that's what we try to do, is empower our victims, then make the decision. At least let her know you're available. And set up a signal if need be.
Because I remember you mentioned how like police officers are one of the like occupations that
Yes.
have a lot of domestic violence. So
That's true. When you work in an issue with power and control, and police have power and control, they often take it home. My husband's a retired vet, 20-some years in the Air Force, and I've seen it because I worked in the Air Force Family Support Centers, and I've seen where they take it home. And the Air Force, or the military at that time, used to take the batterer out of the home and put him in the dorm and tell her, okay, you're fine, and then when his 30 days in the dorm were up, they sent him right back home. Obviously, we've progressed a long time since then. So again, we don't want them homeless. But you're right, it's a problem. And we're still going to keep trying to solve it. My old boss in California said her job was to work herself out of a job, just like child abuse, just like homelessness. Unfortunately, we're going to be here for a while because a lot of the myths and things keep going. So if you know someone who's a victim, just keep talking to them. Ask them what they want. How can you help them? I had a client who gave her sister a suitcase and put it in her car, her sister's car, so that when she got ready to leave, she had everything she needed to leave. So there are ways to help people on the quiet. Any other questions?
Question, and really anyone can answer this one. In recent past, I've heard of some groups or organizations trying to open up homes to help people, maybe perhaps in a neighborhood, something like that, and then meeting resistance. Is that something that you all encounter, whether it be for the children or for the domestic violence?
Go ahead, and go first.
Anytime that we have an arrangement made, generally speaking, the idea of the neighborhood, so like where this is, it's going to decrease the value of the homes. There's going to be unsavory individuals there. Especially with kids, you're going to have a lot of breaking and entering. You're going to have juvenile crime. So there's a lot of historical validation that comes with that. sure these kids will break in, I don't know, and get food, some of them. Some of them are breaking in order to get money to get some. It's not always nefarious. You know, sometimes it is, especially the Callaway area, we still have some homes that are not put back together. We've got kids that live there. We had a house in the Cove earlier this year. There were five homeless Bay kids living there.
A lot of people don't want them in their neighborhood. NIMBY is, you know, everybody knows NIMBY, right? Not in my neighborhood. I lived in Southern California for over 20 years, and they opened up this, there was a Kmart, Walmart store, and they decided they were going to put in housing. And the people who came out that said, don't make it long-term housing because you know those people. Well, where I live, the houses started at $300,000. My son, both of them, who are college graduates, couldn't buy a house, but they could have afforded low-income housing. But nobody wanted them there, not realizing that you're not talking about Joe Blow off the street, you're talking about kids and adults. The other issue is, when people want to open things, it's wonderful. However, there are laws and rules, and those laws and rules will make people not want to do it after they find out. Because like I said, we could put 21 people, including the kids, in our shelter if we weren't in COVID. But right now, we can't put two families in the same room because we can't expose somebody not knowing where the other person was. So that's the rules. In our shelter, we have to wear masks for that exact same reason, because we don't know where people have been. And we need not only to protect ourselves, but we need to protect all the people in the shelter. We can't add to their problems. So when somebody says, oh, I'll take 5 domestic violence victims, out of the goodness of their heart, we go, thank you. But do they know what I just taught today? Do they understand about empowering and not putting rules on them and not making them in a worse situation and really escalating the problem? And then how do you keep them safe? So that's some of the reasons.
I have a question. How long are families able to stay with you guys in the shelter?
So under our HUD funding, they can stay for 45 days and be extended up to 60. What we don't have in any of these 6 counties is transitional housing. Once their 60 days are up, they're out. They've got to either find low-income housing or another shelter to go to. Someday we hope to do a capital campaign and actually build apartments. The shelter I worked for in California, we had 40 apartments that were all transitional from anywhere from 3 months, 6 months, 2 years to 5 years. Which was great. So we could move people through, but again, we only had, a small number of those for where we were. So that's one of the biggest problems once they leave is how do we, and we start from day 1, trying to figure out where they're going to go on day 60, which is really hard.
The homeless teens, are they allowed to use the shelter, the homeless shelter downtown or Bethel Village or anything? They have to be at a certain age, don't they, to go there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think so.
And they have their own criteria.
Yes.
So Bethel Village is a dual diagnosis clinic, so it's really hard to put somebody who's just a domestic violence person who has no substance abuse issues in there.
Okay.
We have some good MOUs with them that we could put somebody for maybe 7 days, but they don't meet the criteria of their funding. A lot of times it comes down to a funding issue. Who's paying the money to do this? And the rules that go with those grants. And the rules are really strict because funders want to make sure we're not wasting their money. Our funding, a lot of it for the shelter, majority comes from HUD. We also get VAWA and VOCA money. The Salvation Army is our financial umbrella. We don't get money from the Salvation Army unless you tell them it's for us. So we have to continue raising funds for things that are outside the scope of what we do get money for, which is always a problem. Like, how do we buy groceries or fix a flat tire or get somebody a car? Those things are never covered, besides staff salaries, which are rarely covered. So we have to raise money for that too. But yeah, it's hard to share with other shelters if you don't meet their criteria.
Speaking of money, are y'all under the United Way umbrella then? So are you guys not, are you 501c3 that can be donated to? Okay, I was curious about that, but Salvation Army is under that.
Yeah, and then we have our own, again, it goes to Salvation Army, but it has to be earmarked to domestic violence.
Right.
So that it comes to us.
Yeah. How do y'all get your funding?
We're Bay District schools.
It's all Bay District.
Yep. So we have Title I, Title IX, ESSER, any of that funding that they can get, which is always short. 2 years, 3 years, usually. But I wanted to follow it with the question about the teens, And for those of you who've been here before, so I did this right after Michael. I had boys who were unaccompanied, who had they were in Hurricane Michael, tied themselves to trees because no shelter would let them in because they had no adult. They didn't have an adult because their dad was incarcerated. And after Hurricane Michael, they were not allowed in because there was no adult. So I'm still fighting that battle year to year to year. If an emergency comes up, such as, where can these unaccompanied kids go? And nobody wants to touch them because of the liability and because of whatever the shelter rules are for emergency sheltering. So it's not an easy fix. You know, how do they prove that they're unaccompanied? How do they prove that this shelter will be okay for them to be in? God forbid something happened while they're at the shelter, such as domestic violence, rape, whatever. So there's still all those little caveats that are still there, especially our area. We're gonna have hurricanes, so.
And one thing that I thought of too, in mentioning like, so some of the kids, you know, they can't get services because they don't have a parent to sign for them to get these services. So if they are 16 or older under McKinney-Vento, what's it called, the McKinney-Vento Provisional Act, which is a federal law, the Homeless Liaison Department, which is our department, we can certify them as being homeless and unaccompanied, and we mark them, and there's a system that all the schools use in Focus. We mark them as homeless and unaccompanied, and if they're 16, then we can provide them paperwork that will allow them to sign for themselves in place of a parent or legal guardian. So once they're 18, of course, they're a legal adult, and then so from 16 to 18, they can use that paperwork. And part of our job is to educate, you know, doctors' offices and things like that, because some of these offices have never heard of that. So we send over the form, they have their legal team look at it and everything, you know, so we have to do some interference there to get that done. But one thing we've seen this year is that our kids are getting younger. Within the last month and a half, we've had probably 5 or 6 cases of 15-year-olds who are homeless and unaccompanied, and that's a whole nother challenge because they're not 16, so we can't certify them, so we have to get real creative to try to get services for them.
And it's true with the domestic violence shelters. When they first opened, they didn't allow women to bring their children in at all. And then they said, okay, well, probably not a good idea to leave them with the batterer. So they said anybody under 10 could come. And again, 30 days was way back when was 30 days. And then they moved it up to where children under 16 could come, but no males. Because males were going to have learned that skill and they were going to abuse people in the shelter, which again took a lot of education, because it's all about educating funders. It's not in the community, but it's also about educating the funder, because the funder doesn't understand, so they're under the same misapprehensions that everybody else is under. And then finally they said, okay, you can take children up to age 18 into the shelter, but you can't take a 19-year-old. In California, one of my big programs, there was an elder abuse program, and if I had an older person who was being abused and living with a domestic violence daughter, I couldn't take her into the shelter because she wasn't the direct victim. So we had to wait for him to hit her to make her a direct victim to bring her into our shelter. Eventually we changed that law. My oldest shelter victim was 90 when she came into shelter, when she actually left her abusive husband of 60-some years. So the laws make it really hard for us to do our job, and there's nothing wrong with laws. I'm all for them. I'm working with cops for over 20 years, judges and district attorneys. So we're all for the laws. The question is, as we educate ourselves, as we get smarter, can we make sure the laws follow us so that we can help the people we're supposed to help?
Any more questions? Thank you very much. So this is a very important issue and a very challenging issue too, but I think if we work all together and toward removing these barriers, I think it can be very powerful. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much.